Hello and welcome back to the Rise of the Sequels. This is the series where I attempt to debunk people's just shitty and vague arguments as to why the Star Wars sequels are horseshit, because they're not. Although the sequels have flaws like all other Star Wars movies, or movies in general, they also have a lot of really interesting things to add to the Star Wars universe. Through this series, I want to bring attention to the brighter spots of the sequel trilogy and explain my reasonings as to why these movies aren't really nearly as bad as everyone says they are. If you enjoyed this video, then please do leave your suggestions as to who I should respond to next down in the comments. However, today we're talking about Rick Worley and his video titled "Every Star Wars Feature Ranked in the Correct Order." I just couldn't not talk about this video because first of all, the title. Without even having watched any of the video, this title is already making me very skeptical. Saying the correct way means the objectively correct way, which means every single detail of filmmaking has been taken into account when making this list. And most of all, that there's no bias. If there's bias, well then it's just your opinion, not the correct way. In this video you say Revenge of the Sith is the best Star Wars movie, and I can get behind that. It's definitely one of my own personal favorites, and if you like it the most then that's amazing. But to say that it's objectively the best movie of the franchise would require an absurd level of detail to prove. Probably much longer than 30 minutes, and I know you talk about all the movies in this video, so yeah, that doesn't leave much time for thorough analysis. However, I don't think that's what he's doing here. It's just his own personal ranking of the movies, an opinion that he believes is the correct way of thinking, which it's obviously not. You can like and dislike whatever movie you want. There's no correct way to rank Star Wars, because there are so many different angles to take and different ways to understand and connect with the movies. I personally understand a clickbaity title is one of the only ways to get views on YouTube these days, but I also don't feel shame in pointing it out. This title, from the beginning, tells me that this video will probably mirror your own bias and opinions, and that what you say should definitely not be taken as the definitive ranking of Star Wars features. Now, this video is 28 minutes long, but I'm not going to be responding to all of it. This series is called Rise of the Sequels. I'm trying to help people see the brighter sides of these movies and debunk shitty and vague arguments towards them, so naturally, I won't be responding to him talking about the originals and the prequels because that's just not what this video is about. From hearing him talking about the first 6 movies, it's clear to see that he absolutely adores them, and that's fantastic. So yeah, even though I don't necessarily agree with all his points, I won't be referencing the rest of his rankings aside from the sequels. However, I may occasionally use some of these arguments to counter what he's saying about the sequels, but don't take that as my hate towards the prequels or originals. I love all the trilogies very dearly. So yeah, even though he places Empire Strikes Back on 6th place behind Phantom Menace and Attack the Clones in a video that's supposed to be objectively correct, I'll try to restrain myself from talking about it, and instead, I'll be focusing on responding to his arguments about the sequels. So yeah, now that we've set the groundwork, let's get into it.
What's amazing to me about this first battle here in this first shot is that we're now on the final episode of the series, and he's already invented so many things. He's already got enough ships and things to fill 10 movies. But instead of coasting, he invents more in this battle than in any of the other space battles. I mean, if you think about it, there's honestly more originality and design work in this one shot and in this opening battle than there has been so far in the entire Disney Star Wars era.
Alright, I'm gonna stop you right there. Saying that the opening space battle in Revenge of the Sith has more originality and design work than all of the sequels is just an excessive over-exaggeration. Don't get me wrong, this opening scene is brilliant. It's personally one of my favorite parts of the movie. And yeah, like you say later, Lucas poured so much new and exciting content into this movie, such as the different planets during Order 66. However, saying that this single scene has more original design work than the whole sequel trilogy, it's just wrong, because how could it ever? There's endless amounts of original design work in the sequels. The looks of Kylo Ren, Snoke, Rey, Phasma, the Red Stormtroopers, all the whack alien species in the Resistance and on Cantobite and Ahch-To. Planets like Takodana, Starkiller Base, we have Kylo's cruiser, the Rathars from Force Awakens. It just goes on forever. And that list literally just came from a couple of minutes of me thinking about it. I could name a lot more. I'm not saying the sequels have more originality than the other trilogies because they just don't. But you said that this single scene has more originality than the sequels, and that's just not true. All 3 trilogies excel at creating new and original worlds. It's what makes the world building and wonder of the Star Wars universe so great. It's statements like these that demonstrate just how strong your bias towards the sequels is. We already know now that you have some sort of vendetta against them and that this ranking is going to shit on them with all you have, not even giving them a fair chance.
I mean, Attack of the Clones is great. Just like all the others that Lucas made, there's enough creativity in this movie for 5 movies by other more boring filmmakers.
Rian Johnson is not a boring filmmaker. Just because you don't like the movie he made in the series you supposedly love doesn't mean he's a boring filmmaker, because that's subjective. Also, the word boring is criminally misused here. If you had said bad, then that's at least a better argument for you, because reviews of the movie would have backed that up. However, boring, he is not. To have stirred up so much controversy that people are still passionately talking about your movie over 2 years later means that he elicited a reaction from his audience and generated a whole lot of emotions. A main critique of The Last Jedi is quite the opposite actually, that too much was going on and that Johnson tried too hard to subvert expectations and engage the audience. While I don't personally agree with that critique, that's another issue altogether. So yeah, it's not boring filmmaking if the film in question is still the center of attention within the Star Wars community years later. So yeah, Rian Johnson is definitely not a boring filmmaker. And even then, if you want to say that he's a bad filmmaker, then you'd have to prove that as well. Because he's not. Ozymandias, an episode of Breaking Bad, is the only 10 out of 10 rated episode on IMDb. At least the only one with enough ratings to be considered. And it was directed by Rian Johnson. Knives Out, the 2019 mystery/comedy movie that received a shit ton of nominations at various film awards, was written and directed by Rian Johnson. So yeah, he's a very talented director and writer that tried to make a more indie-inspired Star Wars movie, and the fans just didn't like it. That doesn't make him a boring director. Alright, so before he probably gets into the Disney movies, he talks about the Battle for Endor. Which, okay, you do what you do. If you genuinely like this movie more than the Disney movies, then that's great. But it's just not an objectively good movie. His only reason for placing this movie so highly is that the creatures are cool. Then he talks about the Clone Wars movie from 2008, which is apparently also better than any of the Disney movies, even though the animation is lacking. It looks dry, the story is uncompelling, and like he said, it feels more like a TV show. Again, you'd be far-fetched to say that this movie is objectively better than all the Disney movies. And one of his only reasonings for ranking this movie so highly is that it has a gay purple Jabba the Hutt. And it's not over. He also ranks Caravan of Courage and the Holiday Special over the Disney movies, and fuck me, if this truly is the correct way of ranking Star Wars features, then I'm horrified to see how awful the sequels are. And I also pity the guy for hating them so much that these garbage movies are somehow better than them. Alright, but now he finally moves on to The Force Awakens, but doesn't really say a lot.
You know, here J.J. Abrams does what he always does, which is to set up possible stories rather than actually tell you a story. But it was kind of okay in this case, because it was the start of a trilogy, and you assume that they must have some sort of plan for the answers to all the mysteries that he was setting up. I mean, little did we know. My most cynical self in 2015 couldn't have possibly imagined that not only did they not have a plan, but that they would let Episode 8 just drive off a cliff and say, fuck you, there's not going to be a payoff to anything. Instead, we're just going to give you a half an hour of Rose Tico riding a fucking yak.
Them not having a plan was stupid. I completely agree. However, The Last Jedi answered most of the burning questions presented by The Force Awakens brilliantly. He doesn't even mention Rey's parentage or Luke's character. It's just an empty statement, and dude, your bias towards the sequels is so obvious. Because you know that Rose Tico didn't ride a Fathier for 30 minutes, but you still say it because you think it makes your argument stronger. You know all those sequel haters will watch your video and just agree with that statement, but it's bullshit. You may hate the sequels and that's fine, but you're not even critiquing these movies fairly. Present some actual accurate flaws in the movie and then we can talk about it.
Now, the one thing that should have been a hint here about how bad it could get was the fact that this movie had no reunion between Han, Luke, and Leia. I mean, that's such a colossal oversight, such an unforgivably incompetent decision, that it should have let us know right there that the people steering the ship were completely 100% clueless about what they needed to be doing to follow up the history of the other films.
Alright, what did you want from the sequel trilogy? Fan service? Or an actually good story? Yeah, I know it's sad that we didn't get all 3 of them on screen together again, but it's not their trilogy anymore. They've had their time to shine. Han and Leia reunite, Luke and Leia reunite, and those scenes are great. But Han dies in The Force Awakens, which is important towards Kylo's development. And since Luke was gone, it was just never possible to have a complete reunion. It also sends the message that not everyone gets to say goodbye. And while that sucks, it's a part of life. Imagine if Luke came back and they all had a scene together again. Then what would have happened in the other movies? Luke would be back just like that, and there'd be no satisfying resolution to the problems raised in The Force Awakens. Everything and everyone would be exactly the same as we left them in the original trilogy, with no character development. A lot of people who criticize the sequels attack small details within the movies without looking at the overall picture. Yes, I know a reunion would have been amazing, but then the other two films in the series would have been fucked. If you have to manipulate your story that much in order for some fan service, then you failed at storytelling. There was enough time in the originals for Luke and Leia and Han to shine, and they even had individual moments to shine in the sequels, but focusing on them too much wouldn't have done anything new or interesting for Star Wars. Alright, so now he talks about Rogue One and Solo, and of course he hates them. It's Disney, and Disney are evil monsters. I'm not going to talk about these two movies because first of all, they're not part of the sequels, and therefore aren't relevant to this video. And secondly, he doesn't really make any sound arguments. He just states his opinion, and I can't really say much against that. You guys know my stance on the spin-offs. There'll be a link to my Solo video on screen right now if you want to check it out. I say everything I want to say about the movie there. Also, let me know if you guys want to hear my thoughts about Rogue One perhaps in a separate video. But yeah, whatever. He didn't like them, but I'm more interested in his views on The Last Jedi. And it's up next. Nope! Just kidding. Before The Last Jedi, he has Plan 9 from Outer Space, which isn't even remotely related to Star Wars, but it's an hilarious joke. A movie that isn't even related to Star Wars is better than The Last Jedi. That's just facts. He even says that this movie is objectively one of the worst movies ever made. However, it's still enjoyable and therefore above The Last Jedi. Even though this list is supposed to be the correct way of ranking Star Wars movies, I'm starting to believe that this video is actually his very biased opinion, rather than objective, like he implies in the description. And he has Friday by Rebecca Black above The Last Jedi as well. This man is making my stomach hurt from laughing so much. He's hilarious. And what's this? A story about a hooker with a hairy asshole is also above The Last Jedi? Wow, this movie must be horrible. No, but actually, this section was pretty funny. I like the way he tells stories. He just has no backbone in his arguments.
So what does this film have to offer? How about, for a start, the stupidest plot in the history of cinema? The 2-hour-long, very slow chase. At some point during this movie, actual humans who get paid to make movies thought it would be a great idea to have the entire movie be a chase scene where the two parties in the chase are just kind of going at the same speed. You know, where they're kind of within spitting distance of each other, but for some reason, one can never gain on the other and they can't interact in any meaningful way.
So you think the plot of the movie is bad because it's one long chase scene. I know this has been said a lot, but Empire was a chase scene. Structurally, the two movies are pretty similar. The Resistance fleeing from the First Order mirrors how the Millennium Falcon was fleeing from the Empire the whole movie. Rey training with Luke mirrors Luke's training with Yoda. And at the end of the movie, the chase scene brings them to a planet where the climax happens. Now this doesn't mean the movie is a copy of Empire, because it's not. It's different circumstances with different themes, characters, and plot points. However, the structure of the main plot is similar. So yeah, The Last Jedi is a long chase scene, but so is Empire. And what's wrong with the cruisers not being able to catch up with each other? Why does that make the plot bad? They explain why that's happening. The First Order knows they can follow them through light speed, so the Resistance definitely can't escape them. The First Order knows the Resistance doesn't have much fuel left, and yeah, they could try to light speed ahead and corner them, but that would result in collisions, which would probably bring unnecessarily deaths and destruction to the First Order. Even if they tried to evacuate, the First Order would notice. They have no reason to risk open assault when they can just wait it out. The Resistance was doomed. It was only by sheer luck, a 1 in a million chance that the lightspeed ramming succeeded. How could they ever have foreseen that? The First Order's plan is a good plan, and the plot revolving around a chase scene is, in my opinion, interesting. It still leaves a lot of room for other storylines, and it's not like the chase is the only thing going on. And if you have a problem with the plot outline of The Last Jedi, then you have a problem with Empire as well. Which I know you don't. Granted, maybe you have an issue with this chase scene structure because it's been done before and you believe it's repetitive. However, you don't make that clear in this video, so I can't really see where you're coming from.
And for some reason, people on the Resistance ships can come and go on smaller ships whenever they want to, but they only use this ability to go on meaningless side quests that don't have any impact on the plot, rather than just hopping on one of these smaller ships and leaving the ship that they know is being tracked. Even though there's apparently only like 50 people in the Resistance and they could easily all do that, but they don't.
Alright, first of all, yes, smaller ships can catch up with the big cruisers because they're faster. This isn't something the movie is trying to hide. The TIE fighters catch up with the Resistance cruiser, but they can't take it down. This is not a plot hole. Also, Rose and Finn's excursion is not a meaningless side quest. It has purpose. They're trying to find the codebreaker so that they can save the Resistance. That's not meaningless. It might not have been the most well executed scene in the movie, and it may have dragged on unnecessarily, but the overall purpose of the scene is still meaningful. Oh, so no, they couldn't just all go on a ship and fly away. First of all, do you really think the plan hadn't been thought out? They probably just didn't have enough ships for everyone, especially since there are definitely more than 50 people in the Resistance. Second of all, it's a lot easier for one ship to get away than a whole fleet of ships. It would have taken immense planning and time that they just didn't have, and they wouldn't even have gotten very far. And lastly, even if Poe and Finn and Rose had pitched this idea to Holdo, it would have been shut down because Holdo already had a plan she was sticking to. You're taking the piss out of something that makes sense. There are other things to criticize about Rose and Finn's subplot, like how Finn's character arc is not done properly, since he learns that war is bad, which he should already know since he deserted the fucking military because war is bad. This arc would have been better used on someone like Poe, who can be impulsive and brash without seeing the bigger picture. There are actual sound criticisms of this movie, but so many people just overlook them and instead choose to focus on nitpicky, irrelevant shit, and it's kind of pissing me off.
I mean, they could have just called somebody in another ship that wasn't being tracked to come get them, or to come bring them fuel. I mean, nobody in the Resistance knows anybody who knows anybody in the whole galaxy that can rustle up a fucking can of gas. I mean, honestly, if this is how well they plan, then honestly, they all fucking deserve to die, and I'd enjoy watching it.
I guess you just really didn't watch the movie. On Crate, when they send out their massive distress signal, no one answered. No one was willing to help them. They were alone. The First Order had effectively scared half the galaxy shitless, and most people wouldn't want to get involved in a ploy that could end their lives. Do you seriously think that the Resistance had not thought about calling for help? Even if they did, would people have answered? If your crippled friend with no legs called you asking for help because he was being followed by the whole Mafia, who would kill anyone who stood in their way, including you, would you help him? Most people wouldn't. That's the kind of situation this was. People had lost hope, and why wouldn't they have? They worked so hard to defeat the Empire, and then the First Order just comes along and ruins it all. Yeah, if I was them, I probably wouldn't have helped the crippled friend either. If you think you'd act otherwise, then please tell me down in the comments. Then he talks about the lightspeed ramming scene creating massive plot holes in Star Wars space battles, and honestly, so many people are split on this, it's hard to find a definitive answer. What do you guys think? I personally think it's just an extremely lucky shot that would be completely stupid to attempt from anyone other than someone extremely desperate. Someone with no other options. I mean, that's my reasoning for why we haven't seen it before, because who the fuck would even try it? But yeah, I also know that there is an insane amount of lore that I just don't even know about, so yeah, tell me down in the comments what you think, because he does raise an interesting question.
And you know, if you think about it, the Empire, the First Order, very slowly following the Resistance from point A to point B, is the only thing that happens in this entire fucking movie, you know?
That's just wrong. The whole Luke and Rey story arc, Canto Bight, everything that happens on the Dreadnought, that all happens as well here, so your point is invalid. Yes, the chase may be the overarching plotline of the film, but there's so many other players at hand.
So if you actually need to ask what's wrong with the movie, the answer is everything. Every single fucking thing is wrong with this movie. But you know, hey, let's go into a few other things while we're here, right? How about this Mary Poppins shit?
I've said this countless times. Other than the fact that it looks goofy, this makes sense. Leia has the Force. We know that from the original, so yeah, her Force pulling herself back to the ship is not a mistake. Granted, her surviving in space is weird, but has been done before by Anakin and Obi-Wan on General Grievous' ship. That was the vacuum of space they were presented with, and they were fine. So why shouldn't Leia be able to survive the same? It's a fantasy movie, not a sci-fi movie. It's not supposed to be scientifically accurate. So move on.
How about this shit?
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
Yup, I hated that. I cringed, but fuck me, I was happy when Finn didn't reciprocate.
How about the idea that they had Carrie Fisher right fucking there playing Princess Leia, and they put her in a fucking coma so we could have Admiral fucking Holdo instead?
Well, the story wouldn't have made sense if Leia had been in charge. Did you not watch the movie? It's the back and forth between Poe and Holdo that brings conflict to the chase plotline. Their dynamic adds to the themes of the movie and allows for character growth in Poe. If Leia had just been alright, then there had been no fucking conflict. But oh, sorry, I forgot, you don't like complex conflict in your movies. Which is why you like the Ewok movies. As long as there's physical action, then your 6-year-old mind is satisfied. Don't get me wrong, having an inner child inside you is amazing, but it just doesn't help your case when you're trying to make a serious video criticizing The Last Jedi. Holdo was a great addition to the movie, and putting Leia in her place would have erased a lot of good thematic elements in character development. It's also generally thought that each film of the trilogy kind of placed some focus on one of the original trio members. The Force Awakens had Han, The Last Jedi took a look at Luke, and I presume Rise of Skywalker meant to feature Leia a bit more. Of course, unfortunately, that wasn't possible due to Carrie Fisher's shocking and untimely death. However, they couldn't have known that would happen making this film, so they put Leia on the back burner for the time being. It's sad that we didn't get to see more of her, but it's not the filmmakers' fault.
I mean, how about the fact that they have Frank Oz there playing Yoda, and somehow they can't even make Yoda look like Yoda? I mean, seriously, we have the original movies to look at. It's not like they were trying to speculate about what Yoda might look like from an ancient oral tradition. I mean, we fucking know what Yoda looks like. Just fucking do that, you fucking clowns.
Oh, fuck off. You can't seriously be angry that Yoda's eyes look a bit more weedy. It's a single tiny detail, and it doesn't take away from what's going on. I've never heard anyone complain about what Yoda looked like in this movie. At least hate on how he uses Force lightning, but no, that's an actually good argument. The reason you like the Ewok movies is because they have cool creatures, right? But they look like this. You've got to be joking.
And I know what you're thinking now. You're thinking, all right, we get it. You don't like The Last Jedi. You're putting it last on your list. You made your point. And actually, though, that isn't true either. The Last Jedi isn't on this list because it's not a Star Wars movie. It's a piece of fucking trash.
I've said this before and I'll say it again. The Last Jedi is Star Wars, whether you like it or not. You can write it off as fan fiction as much as you want, but Disney owns the rights for Star Wars, and in the end, they choose what to do with the franchise. They could legally make A New Hope non-canon, which obviously they wouldn't because they're not morons and they actually respect the franchise, unlike what some people believe. But they could. Just because you don't personally like the movies doesn't mean they're not Star Wars. Grow up. Also, the whole "The Last Jedi is not Star Wars" argument is so overused. Everyone has already said it. Now, I'm not against repeating arguments. I do it all the time because I must. If something is worth criticizing, that is fine for multiple people to say it. However, since you are against reusing arguments, this point is hypocritical. For example, here.
What they bitched about were the romantic scenes, predictably, and it's a childish reaction that it's got old to even talk about it.
Someone saying that Padme and Anakin romance scenes are cringy is in your opinion an overused argument and therefore has no merit because it's childish. So naturally, you saying that The Last Jedi isn't Star Wars is also invalid because it's an overused argument. Is it not also a bit childish to dismiss a film as not being Star Wars just because you don't like it? I'm sorry, I'm just pointing out your hypocrisy. It's a stupid argument. And that's the video. Holy fuck, there were not a lot of actually sound and valid criticisms toward the sequels here. I actually liked the first half of this video, when he was just passionately talking about Star Wars. However, he went completely bonkers when it came to Disney Star Wars. I think what hit me the hardest about this video is how completely one-sided this man's arguments are, especially since he's supposed to be ranking the Star Wars movies the correct way. And apparently the correct way is now actually a synonym for biased way. There was just so much hypocrisy as well as negligence to even consider any positives about the sequels in this whole video, and it's just annoying. There are so many valid flaws to point out in the sequel trilogy, but this man just failed to point out most of the meaningful ones. My mind is blown. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Again, this series is not about blindly praising the sequels as God's creation, or hating on the prequels. It's about helping people understand why some people actually do enjoy the sequels, and that this constant feud within the Star Wars community is completely pointless. There are currently 2 more episodes in this series, and the playlist for them can be found in the description. If you want more content from me, then don't forget to like and subscribe. Join my Discord for riveting discussions. Link is down in the comments. Please keep it civil. This means no name calling, no unnecessary bashing, and no spouting pure hatred. Other than that, I wish you all a great day, stay safe, and peace out.
お前はもう死んでいる。何